The Christian right in the USA is a complex and dirty fighting animal. It turns out that the Carl brothers, who were military darlings of Central Catholic in Pittsburgh, had it all wired up to attack me while I was a child. Naturally, a child does not understand the vocabulary and genius of the church and so forth. As a result, they pigeonholed me as somebody who either would accept the status of not being Christian or that they would make a monkey out of me intellectually with their superior grasp of the church and the New Testament, since they knew that I had been raised outside of the church by a single mother. All of this was being designed by poor sportsmen in public rhetoric who didn't like the idea of humanism. And they wanted to pit the extremes against one another, and they found a couple of gaggly rock stars who said they were down with that they would play the role of one extreme in order to trigger the backlash from the other extreme. You can bet your bippy that England had its money on the fascism that was granted a cover story in Christianity. Now, it turns out when I hear, humane refrains in the media, it's usually Pope Francis I agree with. So, I approve of Pope Francis's peaceful intentions and social positions regarding poverty, tolerance, the climate reform, fair distribution of resources. There are a good many issues with which I agree with Pope Francis. Arguably, the idea that a person is Christian just comes down to recognizing the ethical premises of the U.S. Constitution that recognize that all men as being equal before the Lord, and the principle of trying to be a helpful and good neighbor, valuing human life as essential conscription. And all of the other stuff ascribes to storytelling and mythology. Now, the goal of the imposter groups, the Weasel, Fripp, Carl, DeSantis, Trumpy Tune, is to get me kicked out of community tolerance assumptions on the basis of the idea that I have a bad or disturbed or misunderstanding of Christian. That Christian is a Reich. It's a shield. It's a form of armor. It's a form of psychosis. It's a blood-curdling team. It's a win-win-win-win-win corps d'esprit and so on. All of that stuff you get from Oliver North. And the Christianity leads to Reagan, to Laurel Reed, to Bitburg Belsen. There's nothing new about fascism schmoozing with Christianity. The age of the dictators found Catholics like Leon Degrelle in the movement in the Third Reich. Franco made himself out to be a Christian. So did Chiang Kai-shek when they were hobnobbing together. I mean, there were people who understood that government and socialism was just about the distribution of resources to the poor to help raise people up. FDR certainly wasn't anti-Christian for believing in human rights. And of course, the people who want to control the administration of peace have pointed out, for example, to the Armenian genocide. What went on that led to the Armenian genocide? One of the things was that Christians in the framework of Turkey were something of a dispersed minority, and the British government wanted to help protect them. But it was very difficult to work out the details of how and when and why they would protect them because it was humanitarian intervention. And humanitarian intervention isn't a national interest all the time. The stakes can be too high, or you get the idea. So you get those situations where the power structure in the world wants to predominate with an argument that if they close ranks around the big three, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, you have a powerful force for the good that can take care of people, and that will take the hindmost. We don't need these margins of freedom and poetry and music and all of that. And what came gunning through American popular culture was a way of justifying weeding out the avant garde, the beat generation, by pushing an extreme. And they wouldn't let up. They enslaved us to an extreme. And where I find the remedy in Christianity, it's because I never liked that that was happening. They brutally battered me because I wouldn't say what they wanted me to say in groupthink about the blood curdling stupidities and pretense of sarcasm and the reality of real worlds, Peter Gabriel and the Zappas. I didn't swear allegiance to their obnoxious screaming in the woods about raping and killing and eating babies and things that were just not my type of thing to do. And yet they championed a girl who was virtually a pornographic lesbian actress getting it on with me when she said, "Hey, I don't like him anymore," and threw me away. So I believe in the American Library Association. I'm not out to censor Howard Stern, but I'm certainly not going to be drafted into his illicit army. I'm certainly not going to cheer when they burn girls' arms gangrenous to supposedly bring them back to reality. And I certainly am not going to lie about what I heard and witnessed on Mount Desert Island in the 80s. It's ridiculous. And you can see the sort of cult that they had going. They had Will Zell bragging about Joseph Goebbels and saying he was in the Jewish Defense League, and Amanda Harcourt, an attorney for Yoko Ono, backing this up with bloodshed. They were killing innocent bystanders and saying it was to raise money for Amnesty International and the Green Party. And then they said that I was crazy for telling them to get the hell out of here. And they have a domination at the colleges so warped they can actually close the schools with one of their shyster events. And nobody questions it. They give me Kuga, what do you get out of here? It's not a community college that I can go to. Well, so I mean, they're just cutting off the poets. They make up this story. Oh, we hot wired super reality through your battered baby bawling butt. Battered baby bawling butt. Battered baby bawling butt. Say it long enough that you understand it means Spike Lee and the Criminalopolis poaching. And then said, "Oh, well, you don't understand. Well, I'm deaf. I was a child. I was in trauma." And they call it a provincial norm. To expect a prodigy of a battered, traumatized deaf child. They put me up against Ms. Goto from Japan, who was said, "Oh, If I would have seen those things, I would have understood them. She didn't know what to do when she heard about them. It's a bunch of BS. And thus, she was in on them and primed to lead the attack in the first place. It's horribly disturbing. Well, I believe in the principles of the American Library Association. I don't suppress a book because it isn't Christian, but I don't deny the ethical preeminence of Christianity as an ethical system. It believes in taking care of the poor, in looking out for public values in our commonwealth, allowing people to pray. I mean, people have souls or want to believe they do. Greg Carl told me in no uncertain terms, human beings are just things. And James Child must have known about Greg Carl because he said the same thing. It's terrible when people think that human beings are just things. Well, what kind of Christianity thinks that human beings are just things? It's a medieval one. Deaf people can't receive the word of God, so they therefore are hollow and have no souls. So you get a humanist, you hollow him out, deafen him, and he'll never have a soul. And thus, by some miracle, he embraces fascist Christianity. It's absurd. Don't expect me, even if I was too stupid to understand the absurdity of it as a child, doesn't mean it isn't absurd. They were saying, that make pretend sarcasm is deceit. You act like Christianity is a form of deception. Yeah, I mean, what the hell is wrong with you? Oh, it's deception for deception. They lie back. You know, there's so much of it going around. It's an elliptical thing, and I'm inclined to think it's a warmonger agreement, just to use Christianity to get people upset and fight, because the warmonger agreement is that they just think people are things, and if they kill them, they can collect through the Hoover machine of the banking system their their treasure. It's apparently how some of the banks got rich in World War One, was by hoovering up from the battlefield the proceeds of men who had no heirs. You know, so I mean it's ridiculous, and they want us to praise the nuclear missile. For God's sakes, the whole thing is being driven by this overheating fossil fuel venture. And the maniacs who think that doing it deliberately will prove the choice between Christianity and hell. What kind of mentality is that? It's a ridiculous mentality. And if and yet they wheel about and fetch about and tweedledee dee and say because we can write songs that are tongue twisters, you should believe everything that we obviously lie to your faces about. Why should we believe everything they obviously lie to our faces about? Because they can write tongue twisters and put them to music. I'm not into it.